People have been talking about near-death experiences for a long time. It's a strange thing that happens to some people when they almost die. They might be in a bad accident, have a heart attack, or go through something really tough. And then, when they come back, they tell these wild stories. Stories about leaving their body, seeing a bright light, meeting people who have passed away, or looking back at their whole life in a flash. It's easy to just dismiss these stories as dreams or hallucinations, but so many people tell similar tales. And they say these experiences feel incredibly real. More real than real life, some say. So, it makes you wonder, what is really going on? Is it just the brain messing up as it shuts down? Or is there something more? That's what we're going to talk about. We'll look at what science has found, or at least what science thinks might be happening inside our heads when we get really close to the edge. First, let's talk about what a near-death experience, or NDE, usually involves. Not everyone has every part, but there are common themes. One big one is the out-of-body experience. People often say they float above their body. They can see what's happening in the room, like doctors working on them, and they sometimes report details they shouldn't have known because they were unconscious. This is a tough one for science to explain. How can you see if your eyes aren't working and your brain is barely on? Then there's the tunnel. Many people describe moving through a dark tunnel towards a bright light. This light is often described as loving, warm, and comforting. It's not just a bright spot, it feels like a presence. And sometimes, they meet other beings in this light, often loved ones who have died. People say these meetings feel so real, like they're truly there with them again. There's no fear, just peace and comfort. Another common part is the life review. This is where a person sees their entire life flash before their eyes. Not just a quick highlight reel, but every moment. Every good deed, every hurtful word. And they often experience these moments from the perspective of others. They feel the pain they cause someone else. It's usually not judgmental, but it helps them understand their life in a deeper way. And then there's the overwhelming feeling of peace. People say all fear disappears. The pain is gone. They feel a sense of unity and unconditional love. It's often described as the most profound, beautiful feeling they've ever had. After an NDE, people often change a lot. They lose their fear of death, they become more caring, more spiritual, and less interested in money or material things. They often feel like they have a new purpose. So, these experiences are powerful. And they really change people, but what does the brain have to say about them? This is where it gets tricky. We can't really study an NDE in a lab. It happens suddenly, usually when someone is very sick or dying. Their brain activity is often very low or even flat, which means it's not working at all. How can you have such vivid experiences if your brain isn't working? That's the big question. Scientists have come up with several ideas. They try to find physical explanations for what's happening. They look at what happens to the brain when it's under extreme stress, like when it's running out of oxygen or has too much of certain chemicals. These ideas don't try to say the experience isn't real for the person. They just try to explain how the brain might create such a real experience. One of the most common ideas is that NDEs are caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. This is called hypoxia or anoxia. When your heart stops or you can't breathe, your brain doesn't get enough oxygen. Brain cells need oxygen to work. When they don't get it, they start to misfire. They can cause all sorts of strange perceptions and hallucinations. Think about a fighter pilot. Sometimes, if they pull too many G's, blood rushes away from their head. They can black out or experience tunnel vision where everything goes dark around the edges and they only see a small bright spot in the middle. This sounds a lot like the tunnel and light many NDEs describe, and some people under severe hypoxia report out-of-body feelings or a sense of peace. So, some scientists think this could be a big part of it. The brain is starved of oxygen and it starts to create these vivid dream-like states. But NDEs are usually more complex than just a simple tunnel vision. They have complex stories, emotions, and specific details. And sometimes NDEs happen when people aren't really short on oxygen, like in situations where they are conscious but in severe pain or under general anesthesia where oxygen levels are often well maintained. So, while oxygen deprivation might explain some elements, it probably doesn't explain all NDEs or their rich detail. Another idea is related to carbon dioxide. Too much carbon dioxide in the blood, called hypercapnia, can also mess with brain function. This can happen if you can't breathe out properly. High levels of CO2 can cause feelings of disembodiment, hallucinations, and even a sense of bliss or spiritual awakening. Some people use breathing techniques that deliberately increase CO2 to achieve altered states. So if someone is dying and their breathing is failing, CO2 could build up and contribute to these experiences. But again, like oxygen deprivation, this might explain some parts but not the whole picture. The NDEs are often too structured and consistent across different people and situations to be just random effects of CO2 buildup. And not everyone who has high CO2 levels reports an NDE. What about chemicals the brain makes? Our brains are always full of chemicals. When the body is under extreme stress, it releases a flood of powerful substances. One type is endorphins. These are natural painkillers that will give you a runner's high or help you cope with severe pain. When someone is dying or in immense pain, their brain might release a huge amount of endorphins. This could explain the profound sense of peace, the lack of pain, and the feeling of euphoria that many NDers describe. Endorphins definitely make you feel good, but do they make you see a tunnel or review your life? Probably not directly. They might contribute to the pleasant feelings, but they don't seem to explain the specific narrative elements of an NDE. Then there's a more specific chemical idea, often called the ketamine effect. Ketamine is a powerful anesthetic drug. It can make people feel like they're leaving their body. It can also cause very vivid hallucinations, a sense of timelessness, and even spiritual feelings. It works on specific receptors in the brain called NMDA receptors. Some scientists think that when the brain is under severe stress or dying, it might release its own chemicals that act like ketamine, blocking these NMDA receptors. This could definitely explain the out-of-body feeling and the sense of going to another dimension. It's a powerful dissociative drug, meaning it separates your mind from your body. So, it's a strong candidate for some aspects of the NDE, but again, it's still a drug, even if the brain is making it. It might explain the feeling of being out of body, but how does it create the specific content, like seeing your grandmother or reviewing your life? That's still a leap. Another area of the brain that gets a lot of attention is the temporal lobes. These are located on the sides of your head near your ears. They're super important for memory, emotions, and even spiritual experiences. People with certain types of epilepsy that affect the temporal lobes sometimes have strange experiences during seizures. They might feel like they're leaving their body, or have sudden feelings of intense meaning or spiritual presence. Some even report seeing vivid images or hearing voices. Scientists have even been able to stimulate the temporal lobes with electricity in awake patients. When they do this, people sometimes report out-of-body sensations or a strong sense of a spiritual presence. So, some researchers think that as the brain is dying, the temporal lobes might become overactive or go into a kind of last hurrah electrical storm. This could create the rich emotional and spiritual content of an NDE. It's like the brain's spiritual center is firing wildly as it shuts down. But again, a seizure is usually a chaotic event. While it can produce vivid experiences, NDEs are often described as incredibly orderly, clear, and structured. They have a narrative. And while temporal lobe stimulation can create parts of an NDE, it hasn't recreated the whole coherent package of a tunnel, light, life review, and meeting specific people. And then there's the idea of REM sleep intrusion. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's the stage of sleep where we dream most vividly. During REM sleep, our bodies are usually paralyzed so we don't act out our dreams. But sometimes, especially when people are very stressed or sleep deprived, aspects of REM sleep can bleed into waking life. This is what happens in sleep paralysis, where someone wakes up but can't move, and often feels a terrifying presence in the room, or even floats above their body. Some researchers suggest that the extreme stress of dying might trigger a massive, overwhelming REM-like dream state in the brain. It's like the brain goes into a super dream mode, but with the vividness and realness of waking life. This could explain the vivid imagery, the emotional intensity, and even the out-of-body feeling similar to sleep paralysis. The brain, under duress, might be trying to make sense of its impending shutdown by generating a narrative, a dream of transition. This idea has some appeal because dreams can be very personal and incorporate past memories, which could relate to the life review. But the clarity and coherence of NDEs often go beyond normal dreams, which tend to be more fragmented and bizarre. And the feeling of utter peace and transcendence in an NDE is quite different from the often frightening nature of sleep paralysis or typical dreams under stress. Most scientists don't think it's just one of these things. It's probably a mix of several factors. The brain is an incredibly complex organ. When it's under extreme stress, like when someone is dying, all sorts of things start to happen. Not a neat controlled shutdown. It's more like different parts of the brain are reacting in different ways to the lack of oxygen, the buildup of chemicals, and the overall trauma. So, imagine a cascade. First, oxygen levels drop, causing some parts of the brain to misfire, leading to tunnel vision. Then, certain chemicals are released, causing a feeling of peace or disassociation. At the same time, the temporal lobes might become active, bringing up memories or creating spiritual feelings. It's a perfect storm of brain activity as it approaches its limit. The brain, in its final moments, might be trying to create a coherent story, a comforting narrative, to make sense of the chaos it's experiencing. Now, let's talk about some actual research. It's hard to study NDEs in real time, but a few brave scientists have tried. Dr. Sam Parney is one of them. He's a critical care doctor who has done a lot of work on NDEs. He led something called the AWARE study, AW awareness, during our resuscitation. This study tried to get objective data. Here's what they did. They put pictures or symbols on shelves in hospital rooms high up, or they could only be seen from the ceiling. The idea was that if someone had an out-of-body experience and truly floated above their body, they might see these hidden images. If they could report seeing them later, it would be strong evidence that consciousness can exist outside the body, even if just for a little while. They also used monitors to record brain activity EEGs and heart activity ECGs on patients who were undergoing cardiac arrest. This is when the heart stops and the person is clinically dead. Doctors tried to revive them. The goal was to see if there was any brain activity during this period of clinical death. What did they find? Well, no one in the AWARE study reported seeing the hidden images on the shelves. This was a bit of a letdown for those hoping to prove out-of-body travel, but the study did find something else very interesting. Some patients, after being revived, reported clear, vivid NDEs. And more importantly, the brain monitors sometimes showed activity after the heart had stopped. Normally, when the heart stops, brain activity is supposed to go flat within seconds. But in some cases, Parnia's team observed electrical activity, including gamma waves, for up to several minutes after the heart had stopped. Gamma waves are usually associated with high-level consciousness, focused attention, and vivid recall. This was a big deal. It suggested that the brain might still be somewhat active, or at least capable of generating complex experiences, even when it's considered clinically dead. It's like a lingering spark of consciousness even after the main engine has stopped. This finding doesn't fully explain NDEs, of course. It doesn't tell us what was causing that activity or why it led to a tunnel or a life review. But it does challenge the simple idea that the brain is completely off the moment the heart stops. It opens the door to thinking that there might be a window of time where complex brain processes can still occur, even under extreme conditions. Other studies have looked at a burst of brain activity right before death. In some animal studies, scientists have seen a sudden surge of electrical activity in the brain, sometimes called a hyperconnected state, just as the animal dies. It's like the brain goes into overdrive in its final moments, potentially releasing a flood of information and creating intense perceptions. If something similar happens in humans, it could be the source of the incredibly vivid and detailed NDEs. But it's important to remember that most of what we know about NDEs comes from people's stories. These are subjective, they're real to the person who experienced them, but they're hard to measure objectively. Science likes things it can measure, things it can repeat in a lab, and NDEs don't fit that model easily. This is why there's often a big gap between what science says and what people who have NDEs feel. Many people who have an NDE are convinced it proves there's an afterlife, that consciousness can exist outside the body, or that there's a spiritual dimension beyond what we usually perceive. For them, it's not just a hallucination, it's a profound spiritual truth. Science, by its very nature, tries to find physical, measurable explanations for everything. It doesn't usually talk about souls or afterlives. So, when scientists talk about hypoxia, endorphins, or temporal lobe activity, they're trying to explain the NDE within the framework of what we know about the brain and body. They're not trying to discredit the person's experience or say it wasn't meaningful. They're just trying to find the biological mechanisms. It's a huge mystery, and it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. Because if science can fully explain NDEs as purely brain-based phenomena, what does that mean for the idea of consciousness continuing after death? On the other hand, if science can't fully explain them with current models, then it pushes the boundaries of our understanding of the mind and body. The truth is, we don't have all the answers. No one can say for sure exactly what happens in the brain during an NDE. It's likely a very complex mix of things. The brain is an amazing thing. Even as it's shutting down, it might be capable of generating incredibly rich, meaningful, and transformative experiences. It could be a kind of survival mechanism, a way for the brain to cope with the ultimate stress of death by creating a comforting narrative. And regardless of the scientific explanation, the impact of NDEs on people's lives is undeniable. People truly change after them. They often become more loving, more altruistic, and less fearful. They feel like they've seen something profound, and it gives their life new meaning. That personal transformation is a real effect, no matter what caused the experience in the brain. So, when we ask what happens in the brain during a near-death experience, we're peeling back layers of a very complex puzzle. We're looking at how the brain reacts under the most extreme conditions. We're seeing how chemicals, electrical signals, and different brain regions might interact to create sensations that feel more real than reality itself. It's not just one simple switch. It's a symphony, or perhaps a chaotic orchestra of different brain processes all firing at once as the lights dim. Oxygen deprivation might cause the tunnel, endorphins might bring the peace, temporal lobe activity might conjure the spiritual feelings and life review, and perhaps some lingering organized activity, like what Sam Parnia found, allows for that coherence and vividness. It's still a frontier of research. Doctors and scientists are still trying to understand these experiences. They're trying to gather more objective data, which is incredibly difficult given the circumstances. They're using new technologies to monitor brain activity in patients who are critically ill. But it takes time. For now, NDEs remain one of life's great puzzles. They push us to think about what consciousness really is, where it comes from, and whether it's entirely dependent on a working brain. We have some strong theories about what might be going on inside the brain, and these theories help us understand how such powerful experiences can be generated by our biological machinery. But they don't erase the profound impact these experiences have on people, and they don't entirely close the door on the mystery of consciousness itself. It's a journey of discovery, and we're still very much in the early stages, and that's okay. It's important to respect both the science and the deeply personal, transformative nature of these experiences.